Well, I've been made aware of what's happening out there at the call-taking 000 call-taking centre. Let me be very clear, both the call-takers and the government are concerned to make sure that safety is our first priority, absolutely and utterly. I'm advised that there are no cuts. It is not about cuts. The full staffing complement and roster is still applied. What they are trialling is a circumstance where, while they've got full staffing complements, if somebody doesn't turn up for a particular reason, whether it be a sickness or some other reason they don't turn up to work, among the complement of people in there as call takers, their trial is, can they continue to operate rather than calling people in on to replace that
so
person.
they're reducing their minimum staffing levels?
No, they're not reducing it, but they're having the same basic staffing levels.
No, but they're reducing their minimum.
And what they're saying is, if there's a pattern of activity, when say 10 people are supposed to turn up to work and only 9 turn up, and if the pattern of activity is such that those 9 people can more than adequately cope with the call pattern, then rather than calling somebody in who's off duty needs to be called back into duty to make up the complement, can we operate on that 9?
Well, that's reducing minimum staffing levels.
Well, no,
Yes, it is.
it's responding in a circumstance where somebody is away for unforeseen
But
circumstances.
you have a minimum staffing level, and if
Neil,
somebody's away, you match that minimum. What you're saying is they're reducing that.
What they're saying is that they will only do that in circumstances when the call-taking pattern allows it, and they also say that it's been operating now since mid-July with absolutely no reductions in service, no delays in calls being dealt with, no delays in calls being passed on to the appropriate agencies for response. So it is a trial, they're having a look at it, but I can assure you, as Premier of the state and our emergency services' prime responsibility is safety and security of the state.
How many people will be taking calls from police, for example? What's the minimum level there?
Well, I don't know those particular numbers, but
it's reported it's been cut from 4 to 2. Between 5 a.m.
Well,
between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m.
There is no cut. There is no cut.
Premier, with respect, it's a cut to the minimum.
No, it isn't. If there's 4 people rostered, there's 4 people who turn.
Okay, well, as of the previous system, say there were 4 people rostered and 1 didn't turn up. They called in an extra one, right?
They called in an extra.
What do they do now if they don't turn up?
They assess whether there's a flow of calls that demand somebody to be called in, because sometimes they were finding, Neil, that they called an extra person in and that person didn't take any calls for virtually the whole shift.
But do you understand, they had a minimum staffing level which they met before. Under this trial, they've lowered the minimum staffing level. They've cut it.
No, what they're doing is having a flexible system so that if they had 9 rostered and 8...
never roster 9, 8's the maximum.
Well, and 8 turn up, then they assess whether that extra one is needed to be replaced. So
they have a different minimum to what they've previously had.
They're saying if somebody doesn't turn up, they make an assessment as to whether that replacement is needed in those circumstances.